Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Pavlich, along with Gianna Caldwell, Nicole Sapphire, and Charlie Hurt. And welcome to the big weekend show, the big show tonight. Former President Donald Trump is back on the campaign trail with a vengeance after pleading not guilty this week to new federal charges stemming from special counsel Jack Smith's 2020 election probe. The president's supporters rallied in Columbia, South Carolina, as he vowed to win his legal fight.
No, I'm being indicted for you. I'm being indicted because of what we've done, and I'm being indicted because they're afraid of all of us, because we have a movement that's never been seen in the history of our country. Make America Great Again, MAGA. It's never been seen. There's never been anything like this. And never forget, our enemies want to stop us because we are the only ones who can stop them. We're the only ones. And this is why this election is so important. They want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. I'll never let that happen.
During the 76-minute speech, Trump also accused the DOJ of giving the Bidens preferential treatment, slamming the president, now dubbed Crooked Joe. And this comes as the New York Times has a new poll with Siena College showing Joe Biden and Donald Trump in a neck-and-neck contest if the 2024 presidential election were held today. So, Charlie, that poll is really interesting because, of course, you know, the media says that he can't win. Lots of Republicans say he can't win. But the polling is showing that Donald Trump actually has a decent chance of beating Joe Biden.
Yeah, and I would think that after the course of a campaign, an actual campaign where, the press was not able to suppress important information about the Biden family, and Donald Trump had an opportunity to defend himself, I would think you would see those numbers change and probably change dramatically in his favor. Look, this is a terrible way to do politics, but in a lot of ways, this is where Trump is at his best. He is defiant. He is standing up against the machine. If you just look at the policies of the guy, in our lifetime, we've never had a more mainstream politician in terms of policies. And so you have to ask yourself, why do these people hate him so much? And what is it? Why will they go to such lengths that they will even throw the First Amendment overboard in order to stop him?
And Gianna, back in 2016, when President Trump was successful in beating Hillary Clinton, his argument was, I'm standing up for you, the forgotten men and women of America. And he was able to actually pull voters from the Democratic Party to put him over the top. And that's what he's doing now with his language in response to these indictments. And it seemed to work last time. And, Americans, if you look at the polling, also think the federal government's far too powerful and that these indictments have a political bent to them. So it certainly favors him when it comes to voters who may be looking at their choices.
I mean, certainly it does. And since you mentioned indictments a couple times, I'm going to mention this Onion post again. Trump campaign worry there may not be enough indictments to meet all fundraising goals. And I just think that is very interesting, the point that you just laid out. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many Americans capitulated to the idea that he was the guy in 2016, because he did say, they're coming after me because I'm fighting for you. And that's such an important point. That's one of the things that I think a lot of voters, conservative voters, really and truly believe. Now, the problem with all this politicking through the Justice Department and the FBI, 6 years ago, the trust and credibility that people had in the FBI was at 80%. Now today, according to a Fox News poll, is at around 59%. That's terrible. You need to be able to trust the FBI and the DOJ. And I was interviewing Nicole Parker, former FBI agent, who was saying, hey, when people started to distrust the FBI, it made it much more difficult for us to do our jobs, for sources to come in. This has become problematic, I think, on many levels, more than what the media and the Democratic Party really realized. This is now what Trump is going to use to potentially actually win. You're prosecuting me not because of any crimes and wrongdoing, but because I'm fighting for the American people. And that could be a winning message for him.
And Nicole, Gianna talks about the double standard, and in America, how you're supposed to be able to rely on the equal application of the law. Donald Trump has pointed this out multiple times. We have dozens of these indictments and charges, or three indictments, dozens of charges, rather. And he's talked about this not just with the election situation that we saw last week, but also when it comes to the classified document scandal and Joe Biden's mishandling of that. Let's take a listen and get your response.
Virtually every poll, we're kicking Biden's ass. And that's the problem. If I wasn't, we wouldn't be under investigation by deranged Jack Smith. You know the boxes hoax, right? The boxes hoax. He's got boxes in his garage by the Corvette, where the house is run by Hunter I wonder what happened with those boxes. But all they care about is Trump. These guys, what they're doing with this election interference, and the Senate has to step up and do something.
I mean, it's a valid question, right? I mean, how is that Hunter Biden, who is involved with all these foreign schemes and criminals and criminal activity himself on the laptop, as we know, and yet the classified information is in the garage next to the Corvette he's driving around with women who are not familiar to any of us. I mean, it is a little bit ridiculous, right?
Well, of course it is. And they're obviously being treated very differently. But, one thing, Trump said it best in his Truth Social post, where he says he's one more indictment away from a victory. And on one hand, that's true. He's very confident in what he said. But the polls show that he and Biden right now are neck and neck. And yes, when he lost to now President Biden last time, he will have his base. And these indictments will continue to rile up his base. They will continue to, they're just playing into the fact that the election's stolen. They're suppressing information. And so the people who are already for Trump are just going to stay for Trump. But it's not going to actually bring more people to his side. And that's one of the things he has to be careful of. He cannot just continue to go to his fundraising events, his rallies, maybe even the debate, and talk about the election being stolen or the indictments. He also has to talk about things that are fundamental to Americans, not just a part of his base, specifically the economy. There are still people who are struggling to afford their electricity, their water, and some of their other utilities. And so he has to remember it's not just about his base. He's actually neck and neck with Biden in the polls. He's not kicking his you-know-what. And so if he wants to really secure a win, if he becomes the nominee, he has to appeal to people outside his base.
Charlie, the Biden administration and Joe Biden himself has been trying to paint Trump as a criminal while ignoring this flood of information we have, including the testimony from Devin Archer last week, that Joe Biden not only lied to the American people, but was more heavily involved in foreign business dealings while he was a vice president running foreign policy for the country and pretending he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, not only do they want to distract from all of their illicit criminal behavior on their part, but they also want to distract from the fact that they have no solutions that anybody wants. They're, on the issues, all of their prescriptions for the issues ailing people are rejected by American voters. And I think Dr. Sapphire makes a great point. I would disagree in part, but agree with the far more important, larger point. At the end of 2020, Donald Trump was still winning over voters, talking about issues. Unfortunately, half the country had already voted by the time Election Day rolled around. There are still winnable, gettable people, but he has to talk about those issues. And those issues, and these are not like 60-40 issues. On stopping the catastrophe at the border, it's 90-10. Yeah. Everybody agrees with President Trump. Nobody agrees with Joe Biden. And so that's the other thing that they're desperate to distract from.
Yeah, and the economy as well, Gianno. I mean, they're trying to sell this Bidenomics thing by using fake figures and false statistics about how they've had some kind of recovery. Meanwhile, all these companies are cutting jobs. People are trying to work one or two jobs. Inflation is still way too high, and yet they're out there touting.
And that's a really important point, because I remember when Kamala Harris said, oh, people can't afford to write, a $500 check, but the country's doing so well economically. Credit card bills, the highest it's ever been, almost $1 trillion. People are leveraged out because of not working during the pandemic and many other issues. The economy's not been doing great. I agree with that 100%. But the question is, how can President Trump stand out by touting his record on the economy and getting it through to the mainstream? I think that's the real issue that he has. No one's listening on the other side. You watch CNN and MSNBC, every day it's about Trump indictment, him going to jail. He's a crook, he's a criminal. He can't get his message out to the people, so I can understand what you're saying. And at the same time, thinking about the Republican primary, Ron DeSantis has said, hey, I'm the most electable one. And we're seeing that the polling, even with all the negative coverage Trump gets, he still could potentially beat Joe Biden.
Americans are smarter than the fact that Joe Biden comes out and says, I've created more jobs and we've seen the economy do so great since I've taken office. And then they say, well, President Trump, when he was president, he had fewer jobs. It's like, we had a pandemic. You had nothing to do with this. And, it's really demoralizing to us as American people that they think we're going to buy it. Kamala Harris comes out, as Gianno's saying, she's like, Bidenomics is working and blah, blah, blah. Here's some fake numbers. And it's like, I mean, do they think we're not paying attention?
Yeah, well, looking forward, 2 weeks, I believe now, Charlie, we have the first Fox News debate, and Martha McCallum and Brett Baer are going to be hosting that in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Trump sent out a fundraising email today. He's been saying he's not going to go to the debate. He's far ahead of all of his opponents, and therefore it would be foolish for him to show up.
It's a vice presidential
But now he's
debate.
asking, that it's a vice presidential debate, maybe if one of them can make the cut, right? But now he's asking his supporters for polling whether he should show up or not.
I hope he debates. He's great at debates. He always shines at debates. But whether or not he does, he is definitely ramping up the publicity for the debate. So.
Yeah.
That's
good.
more
We like that.
entertaining.
Well, we'll be watching the debate. All right.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.